Well, hello, and thank you so much for stopping by. My name is Ciera Payton, and welcome to the In Trive Talks, a place for the inspired, thriving tribe. Now, if you are new here, why don't you just go ahead and stop right now, hit the like and subscribe button because you are going to enjoy everything that you're about to hear from this next guest. And so, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce my next guest because she is an amazing filmmaker and a very, very dear, sweet friend of mine. Now, African American writer, director, producer Phyllis Bancroft presents her film With Salt. It's a powerful short film that deals with the self-silencing that occurs in the aftermath of a traumatic assault. Phyllis is interested in the relationship that women have with themselves and the mask that they must wear to survive in the world. This intense drama, authentically told from a woman's perspective, promises to spur conversation as it courageously investigates the genesis of shame in women who are survivors of sexual assault. Phyllis Bancroft is an alumnus of the AFI Conservatory, Antioch University of Los Angeles, Boston University, and the Hedgebrook Writers Workshop. But without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce Phyllis Bancroft. Welcome, Phyllis. How are you today?
You know what? I am so good today. I am feeling very bright and sunny, hence my bright and sunny dress.
Yeah.
I am always happy to be talking to you, Miss Sierra.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy to have you here. This is the In Trive, and it's, all about highlighting just inspiring people who are thriving. And so I'm just very happy that you were able to come on here and just share with our audience a little bit about you and your background, and most importantly, about your film With Salt. So thank you
okay.
again
Okay.
for hopping on. So, let's just jump on and dive right on in. I just want to, let people know a little bit about where you come from. What was it like growing up being Phyllis,
Oh,
back in your younger childhood years, you know?
that's a whole nother film.
Yeah.
Wow, I am from Hartford, Connecticut.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know anything about Hartford, but it's a place that if you're maybe from there, there might not be any belief that you'll ever leave there.
Yeah, I know those places.
So I grew up in the arts, like doing plays at church. Bertha Burr was the superintendent of the Sunday school, and she had me doing plays when I was 5.
Wow.
And then I grew into doing, when I say do, I mean acting. And because I, at a young age, wanted to be an actress for a
Wow.
living. And then when I got to high school, I was still doing plays with the church. But now I had graduated to Mamie White, who was the director of all the church plays.
Hmm.
And I was the lead most of the time. And
Nice.
I was in high school, there was a point where I was doing 3 plays at the same time, which I cannot even fathom thinking about doing one play and memorizing all those lines right now.
Yeah, and
Like, I
let
don't
alone
even
doing
know.
three. How did you do that?
Girl, I just was committed. Anything to keep me out of the house,
Hmm.
to just get me out and be active and social. Like, I don't know. Like, I was doing one play called The Slave with Two Faces that was at church. And it was about this guy who was a slave and he was mistreated, but then he would go back to his community where he was the master and he would mistreat the people.
Wow.
And I was the
Jeez.
queen in
Of
that.
course. Yes. Of course you were the queen. I love it.
I played the queen. And I was like, bring me a fresh rose. And I would toss my rose and he would take it. So I
I love
had
that.
queen training really early on.
Yes. I just want to backtrack one quick second though, because you said that you knew very early on that you wanted to be in the arts, that you wanted to be an actor.
Yeah.
Do you remember the moment or the catalyst that made you say, this is the path, this is what I want to do?
Probably one of those church plays because I was pretty good and I got a lot of attention and it just felt natural to me. Now, I do remember being 8, and one of my neighbors and one of my friends, her father was Harold Wheeler. And Harold Wheeler was, at the time, the orchestrator of The Wiz. And her mother was also an actress. And her mother came to visit because she didn't live with her parents at the time. Her mother came to visit, and she had just been on like The Jeffersons or something. And I
What?
remember being 8 and going to her and being like, please tell me how I can be an actress. That's all I ever want to do is be an actress. Like, I
Wow.
don't even know how any of this came about, right? I just don't remember. I just remember I had a very strong passion for it. And I really was like, I really need to know. The other person that went to our church who was actually famous
Hmm.
was this woman named Marietta Canty. And Marietta Canty had been in, she had played a slave in many, many movies. And she was a much older lady, but she was from Hartford and she worked with some of the biggest stars, right? And so like, she was also a member of our church and I remember doing storytelling time with her. Like, I was just fascinated with the idea of telling stories, I think,
Wow.
and the imagination. It had nothing to do with stardom. It really was more about the process for me, right? Like, I lived in Hartford, so one of the things in high school was the Hartford stage. It's a regional theater in Hartford,
Hmm.
Tony Award winning regional theater. So I went to a lot of plays there. And I had my drama teacher, Frances Sharp. She knew all the actresses. Like, she just knew everybody, especially if a black show came to town.
Mm.
Then, we would get to meet the actresses. And I was just always just so fascinated with everything about them, the whole process. And I eventually, like, my first real job in the theater, well, first I worked in the box office at the Hartford Stage Company. But working in the box office, I was able to watch every rehearsal, like, over and over. Like, I would just observe, like, how these directors were working with these actors and the whole process. So it was an education that was basically I was getting paid for because I
Nice.
worked there. And yeah, I don't know. That's how I started as an actress. And then when I went to college initially at Boston University, I was an actress and I was doing a play. I was in this group called the Black Drama Collective. And they were gonna do this, the Zoo Man and the Sign. Do you know that play?
No,
Zoo
I
Man?
don't know about that one.
It's about, like, this young 5-year-old who gets shot by a stray bullet and
Oh my
how it
God.
affects the family. And Zoo Man is the guy who does the shooting. So it's about how their lives come together and the
Mm.
trauma involved in it. Anyway, the Black Drama Collective at BU was doing Zoo Man and the Sign, and they didn't have a director, and they were like, "You have to do it." And I was like, "I'm not a director. I'm an actress." And they
Oh
were
my
like,
God.
we don't have anybody else to do it. You have to do it. And I have to admit, I was one of those actresses who was always like telling everybody else, like making suggestions. Not a
Wow.
good thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, anyway, I
I
ended up
mean,
directing. That was the first thing I directed on stage was Zoom In and the Sign.
that is freaking amazing. And I also love too, just when you talked about seeing these other actresses, doing their thing. I mean, it just drives home the point about how important representation is,
Oh my gosh.
for
Yeah.
us. I mean, it's just in Hartford, Connecticut, you got to experience that and see that, which,
No, it's great. It was great.
yeah.
I remember one time one of the show, it was a Shakespeare show.
Mhm.
And I was not exposed to that, Shakespeare, and I was definitely not exposed to black people doing Shakespeare at all.
Mm.
So that was my first, I can't remember which show it was. Maybe The Misanthrope,
Mm.
which isn't Shakespeare, but it's classical, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, there was a black actress, and her diction and voice. I was like, "How do you learn to talk like that?" Like, I just was like fascinated. Like, how, and she was like, "Darling, I'm from the Caribbean. We are, we're very whatever." And I was just like amazed. I was like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. I want to be that."
Yeah.
But that exposure, real, because Hartford is like mostly. I lived in the African American section of town, because it was a little segregated. There's an Italian section,
Oh, wow.
white
I didn't
section,
realize
Jewish
that.
section. So back then, I remember our family moving into our neighborhood, and it was mostly Jewish at the time, but it quickly became a black neighborhood. So
Nice.
yeah, so I had black teachers, is what that meant, who loved teaching and wanted to give the students exposure to the arts. The arts were a big part of my growing up. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I relate to that too. I mean, growing up in New Orleans, I mean, every school I went to had either a music program, dance, drama, something, but it was all about culture and arts. And so, it's so important. I just think for young people to be exposed to that,
It's
very,
so
very early
important.
on. So,
Really,
yeah,
it really is. It's so important.
yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I think my mother and my parents were grateful too that I had a thing that I loved,
mhm,
you know? Because a lot of, I don't know, now some kids have things that they love, but it's harder in the inner city. There's no arts program, so
yeah, I
it's
know,
tough.
especially in today's time. But,
Yeah.
so you eventually left Hartford and you went to university in Boston, right? Or what was the path between Connecticut to Boston and then eventually Los Angeles?
It was a very sordid past
Okay.
path. It was I went first of all, I didn't start at B. I started at Southern Connecticut State University and I just hated it. And so I really wanted to transfer to NYU. And I got into NYU, the experimental theater wing,
Oh,
but my
wow.
parents wouldn't let me move to New York to go to school. So then I transferred to BU and studied theater and English and did a lot of plays. And then I had an internship at Yale Drama School one summer. The drama school it's like a summer stock. And so that was very educational in terms of, you know, just summer stock. Like I had never done that before.
Mhm.
And I felt very like taken care of in that program. Like I think I was the only person of color,
Mm.
but they really responded to my eagerness and commitment to the arts. So it was a really good experience for me. And then I went back to BU and I left BU and I went back to Hartford. And then that's when I worked at the Hartford stage because I was like, I'm going to save money and move to New York. And
Nice.
so saving money when you live with your parents, it's hard because you're spending money just to make yourself feel better about living with your parents, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I got this internship at Circle Rep. There's Circle on the Square and Circle Rep, but this was Circle Rep, which I don't think exists anymore.
Okay.
But I got an internship that paid $60 a week. And I was like, great, I'm going. And my parents they really laughed at me. They thought I was crazy. I packed up my stuff. I saved $400. One of my friends from New York, she's like, come stay with me. She lived in Fort Greene. So we were living in Brooklyn. And once I got this internship, they put me in the sales department. It was called is it the Bowery Theater? I don't know if that
Oh,
theater is
yeah, I've
still
heard.
there.
Yeah. Hmm.
Anyway, it was not on the map. And I was like, well, I've done telemarketing, so I can do some telemarketing for you. I sold so many subscriptions that they gave me bonuses. And that's how I actually made my transition to New York. The $60 a week, one of my best friends, Preston, was like, "You don't move to New York to find yourself. You gotta, everything needs to be right. You need a job." But I was like, "No, I'm going. I'm doing that," and I did it. And I stayed in New York for 6 years, and I worked on some shows, as an assistant to Nima Barnett on the Cosby, not the Cosby Show, but the Cosby Mysteries, which was a show that came out after. I worked on one of John Leguizamo's first
Oh,
shows,
wow.
just as either an assistant or a PA, whatever they were paid, and I was working in the industry, right? So it was an education. Again, it looks like a paid education, right? So
Mm,
that's how I made it into New York. And at that time, I actually had gone back to Hartford to do a play with a small Company One theater in Hartford, which is like a
mm,
small theater. And that's how I went back as a stage manager and I joined Equity. That's how I got my Equity card.
wow.
And then I met like this writer, Lisa Jones, and Lisa had this. She was a great writer, and I directed one of her shows. I had these friends called the Jones Twins do bebop music, and they were performance artists. And we traveled like to DC. We did their show everywhere. It was an awesome show. So I just like, exposed myself to not only just plays but performance artists. I worked with Hazel Goodman, who was also someone who had a one woman show, and her show got picked up by HBO back in the day. You
Wow.
know, it was just, I was in it. Like, I just surrendered to the arts. I just surrendered to it. And it wasn't, I had enough money to pay my bills, and that was really all that was important to me at the
Mm-hmm.
time because I
Yeah.
was working doing what I loved. So it didn't really matter. I wasn't very materialistic. I liked nice things, and
Mm,
somehow I got some nice things, but I wasn't like, I've got to have the best car. And, I was just enjoying my life as an artist, a creator,
yeah. And I
you
feel
know?
like New York allows you to do that,
Yeah.
pretty easily too,
Well, it's
So,
easier to connect with people and create community,
yeah.
you
So
know?
true.
It's
So
just
true.
a theater in general is a community. Like if you're a part of a theater group, you're just a part of that. You're there till midnight. You go to parties with them, you're working all day. It's a long process. So,
Yeah.
you know, and you meet a lot of people. I mean, even at the Hartford stage, when I worked at the box office as a supervisor, that eventually turned into being an assistant director on the stage. And it
Wow.
was because, like, I created relationships with the actors who came to town, with the directors who came to town, So community is everything.
It really is. And I mean, just to sidetrack a little bit, because I do want to talk about AFI and then with SALT, but you've
Yeah.
created a really, really awesome community yourself with the women's groups. I just want to pause on that for a second because not a lot of people out here do those type of things. And, you open up your doors, what, every other month or so for a group of women to get together. And do you want to share a little bit about that and why you felt that was important to do that?
My reasons for starting that group were very selfish. I, it actually just started with a dinner party. And I
Mm,
was just feeling, I'm married and I was feeling a little isolated. Like I just wanted to see my friends. And this was before COVID. This was just like, oh, I used to hang out with my girlfriends. Where are my girlfriends? So I invited 12 girlfriends over and we had a dinner party. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, I really needed this. We should do this more often." And da da da. And I was like, "Okay, let's do it. I'm gonna call it the workshop of creativity, joy, and spirit." And we started actually meeting. It feels like it couldn't have been once a week, but it felt very frequent, right?
mm,
But it eventually became once a month, and now it's maybe once a season, just because people are busy, I'm busy, whatever. But
mm.
I really just wanted to connect with my women folk, we get so much support in a different way from our female friends than we do from, our male relationships. And I was just missing that. So that has been an amazing process of support in that group. I have seen so much success come out of it. Just the support in the community has been amazing for so many of the women,
Mm-hmm.
including myself. And I don't know, it's so important. It's so important, you
It
know.
really is. I mean, I enjoy it, and
Yeah,
thank you for letting me be a part of it. Because,
of
whew,
course.
when I first came there,
I
it was
remember. I remember.
what a mess.
Yeah, no, everyone was, the first meeting, the first actual meeting, there was a lot of sadness in the room, because people were feeling blocked or they just, relationship, career, just so many different levels, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need someone to listen and talk about
Hmm.
it, right? And that environment gave all of us a safe place,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm someone who had done The Artist's Way, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. I might just do it again. I love that book.
Mm.
But I just feel like community, there's so many crazy makers in this town that make your creative life hell. And how do we harness our own sense of safety in our own communities? And that's really what the group evolved to and still
Yeah.
is.
I
So,
mean, and everybody, what I love about it too is that everyone pours in to each other on a real
yeah,
level. I mean, it's,
yeah,
I don't feel any jealousies or any
yeah,
competition or anything. It's just like,
yeah.
this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I want to try to achieve, and everybody's like, okay, let's, you know,
Yeah.
let's speak it into existence. Let's, empower each other,
You
and
know,
then we all come back, at the next meeting or a few meetings down the line, and we're like, oh my gosh, this happened,
yeah.
So,
No, it's amazing. It's funny, I did credit, I don't know if you saw it, the credit in the credits, but I did credit the workshop of creativity during here in the
ah, I
credits. Because I
love
was just
that.
like, even though we haven't met so frequently in the past couple of years because of COVID, it's still something that the energy of it just kind of is there and present always.
Hmm.
I can call any of the women and have in that group with anything,
Hmm.
and it's been so powerful. So
Yeah,
I just gave a shout out because,
I love that. Well, you
yeah,
mentioned, with Salt in the group, and then you ended up producing
yeah,
it
I
and
did
making it.
mention it, right?
So, I mean, I don't know if it was that was the name at the time, but I do remember you talking about, working on your
It
short.
has always been the name because I had already written it as a short story many years
Mm-hmm.
ago, maybe like 15 years ago. And I put it away because it was way too personal to share. But it was something that I had always wanted to make a short film about. I don't know why. I think because I needed to get it out of my body.
Mm-hmm.
But it has become something much bigger than me, right? When I started working on it. For those who don't know, With Saw is a short film about my personal experience with date rape. And when I started working on it, I just kind of felt like it was an important story to tell from my own personal. Again, it goes back to being personal and then becoming much bigger than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I started telling people about what the movie was about, like in every room that I was in, people I had known for my whole life were like, that happened to me, but
Yeah.
I never told anybody. And I couldn't believe like how many women were like, oh yeah, that happened to me. I just never talked about it or, whatever, never dealt with it. And I'm like, wow, like why we're letting this live in our bodies. And I just felt like it needs to be a conversation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that actually, talking about it in the process of developing it and making it was really instrumental to me doing it because I knew that there were women out there who would benefit from it.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like a lot have. I mean, when I saw it a couple weeks ago, and everyone, there who saw it just kind of echoed the same thing about how they related to it, how important it was to see that story, to hear it. And, I think a lot of times, a lot of this stuff is very taboo and we don't want to talk about it. We compartmentalize, we put it away. But to me, it is really important to see that you're not alone in that experience, or
Yeah.
or that it's happened to someone else. And so, that can really alleviate the shame and the guilt around
Yeah.
it. you know?
I think for me, the moment that knew I had to do it was I was reading Hunger by Roxane Gay.
Mm-hmm.
And that book is about her experience with date rape at 12.
Wow.
And it's very like her and how that experience related to her eating habits. And boy, she really goes in. It's just so honest and so raw. And after finishing that book, like something, I just really did feel like my DNA had changed. Like I just felt like I've got to tell my story, because if my story could affect a person like her book did, then that would be success to me. Like
Mm.
that would be very empowering for somebody to just know that they're okay, that it wasn't your fault, that you didn't ask for it, whatever.
Mm.
And that really just gave me a lot of life and like this invisible support, like knowing that there was someone who actually had a you can't really compare experiences, but hers seemed a little bit more harrowing than mine.
Mm.
But it's all like very toxic, and you don't want to hold it in your body. So I just felt like I had held on to it for more than 25 years, you know.
Mm.
So I wanted to just let it go, you know, just let it go.
Once you started putting the pieces together, getting the actors, all of the components, set design, wardrobe, everything, what was that feeling for you? Like what started to come up for you during that time? Did you feel scared or, oh
Yeah.
my God, am I doing this? Or was it just
Oh,
like, ah, I'm getting it out? What was that like for you?
Oh my God, it was a lot, really. I felt I just didn't give myself time to, that's not true. I tried to stay in the moment of each experience, right? Because it was the casting and the pre-production wasn't so bad. It was exciting, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
really exciting. But then the first time we shot it, because we ended up shooting it twice, because the actor that I wanted became unavailable and I
Mm-hmm.
hired someone else. And, I made a mistake. It wasn't the right choice. And there were also some other personnel situations that needed to be changed. And when we got the footage after the first time around, my editor and I were like, well, she had worked with me for many years, and we just felt like it didn't represent the story that I wanted to tell, and the story that she signed up for, and just the level of work that I'm used to putting out. It just
Mm-hmm.
didn't. It didn't. So I was embarrassed, right?
Wow.
Because I felt like I failed. And I had raised all this money, and people had trusted me with their money. And, it was funny because I'm in this group, like a BIPOC writing group that was started with the Actor Studio in New
Mm-hmm.
York. But since it was on Zoom, I was able to attend.
Nice.
So, I had them read it and, develop it and stuff. So they were like behind me. They were just like, oh my God, we can't wait to see. So a couple of weeks went by. I shot it. I didn't show up. I didn't show up. And then I was like, I gotta go back to the writing group. And I'm like, I'm just gonna be quiet, but I know they're gonna ask me. And I was like, I failed. Like
Mm.
I failed and I feel like crap and I'm really embarrassed. There was
Mm.
no even idea of doing it again. I did not even think about doing it again. And then Risharda, she's an actress in New York who's in the group, also a writer. She told me the story about Spike Lee, and I don't know what movie, and I don't even know. I'm sure it's true, but I have no idea what movie. But basically, Spike Lee had raised millions of dollars for a movie. And he got home and he knew that he had failed. Like it wasn't right, it wasn't working. So he ran the bathtub and he got in it with all his clothes on. And he said to himself, I'm not getting out of this tub until I'm able to face the people that gave me money,
Wow.
right? So he stayed in that bathtub for a long time with his clothes on. And then when he got out, he just was like, yo, that million you gave me, like, it's gone. I messed
Oh.
up, right? So she was like, you have to do it again.
Mm.
Just reshoot it. Like, do the movie. You have to, because they read the film. Everyone was like, this is it's a great story. It's a great script. You got to do it. And I was like, okay, okay, I'm going to do it. So then I was like, I wrote like what is it called? MailChimp, and was like, hey, you know, we were very political, about how we shared that information. It just we needed more footage and we needed to reshoot it. And we did another campaign and I didn't spend all the money the first time because we didn't have to do post. We didn't have to do post because we
Yeah.
didn't
Oh,
we were
got
like,
it.
we're
Yeah.
not going to waste our time editing this.
Mm-hmm.
Not gonna it's not gonna be good. So, I still had some money from the first time and we rescheduled it at a time when my actor that I originally wanted was back.
Nice.
And that was great. We reshot it. And
Nice.
it turned out like how I wanted it to.
It's such a beautiful film. And I mean, what I admire so much about you is, I mean, you just have that gusto and you're just like, I'm going to do it, you know? And I feel like well, you said that earlier, you've always had that in you, that just go do it, go get it mentality. And so I just love that you're sharing that because there might be, a filmmaker or somebody who wants to get started in the business listening to this and just even when you feel like a failure, you still get back up and you go out and do it, and it's just that's so inspiring. I love that.
It thank you. Thank you. It is the community that is why I can do that.
Mm.
That I have people lifting me up. I had gone, so the second time around, I was like, I don't know if it was a second. I just knew I had part of the crowdfunding campaign was selling some red velvet cakes.
Yeah.
So I had two cakes to deliver that day. And the first person I went to met me. He said, "Come in, come in." And I go in and he has two bouquets of flowers and a card. And he was like, "Congratulations." And I was like, I failed." Like
Yeah.
he was like, "No, you didn't. Like you really did. And this is gonna be so big and it's so much bigger than you." And I just literally just burst into tears because I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And then it was really amazing. I was like, he gave me flowers. Like I just felt so protected and taken care of. It
Yeah.
was really sweet. And I felt like he just had the confidence in me and knew that even though it didn't go right the first time, that I was on my way to something bigger, right? And then I went to Pam Warner's house and Pam was like, come in for some tea. And I was like, okay. And she put I chose my tea and we're sitting there talking. And I was like, well, damn, I failed. And she was like, well, that's nice. But what did you learn from it? What did you
Yeah.
learn from it? And I was like, well, I learned to really trust my instincts and not to rush, you know, and to be very clear about what I want, and to speak it. And she said, you know what? It takes some people years to learn it, to
Yeah.
learn to do that, right? So it took you, how many, 4 days of a shoot to learn that? So consider it a gift, you know,
Yeah.
and go reshoot it. And so after 2 hours of talking to her and her lifting me up, right? These two people in one day, I just felt like, gosh, the world is like my oyster because I just had so much love and support that I wasn't expecting. It wasn't even like I was going to women in my women's group. These were just two random people that I happen to know, you know, who had so much faith in me that I didn't even necessarily have in myself.
Wow.
But I do now because I see what that community is everything. It just really
Yeah.
is, you
And
know.
I hope that people that are listening right now, especially those that are thinking like, "Oh, I don't have that community or whatever." It's go out and create it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what you've done. And also it's just something, I don't know if I'm sure you feel this way, but there's something really powerful and magical that happens when you just really do start putting it out there, putting your dreams out there,
Yeah.
saying, I'm going to make this movie, I'm going to tell this story. And people get on board, you know?
Yeah. They do. They
People
do.
want, there's, yeah, there might be haters, but there's more lovers than there are
They
haters,
really
I feel
are.
like. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, you're walking proof of that. And
Yeah.
so,
Thank
I
you.
mean, like I can't say it enough. I mean, the film is so great, so wonderfully put together. The actors are amazing, the story is amazing, everything. And so, I'm just curious, what's the next step for it? I know you got it into some film festivals. Any other news you'd like to share about it?
Well, I'm toying with the idea of developing it further. Sandra Evers, who came on as a producer, she's like, "This is a feature. Just develop it because people want to know what happened to her, the main character." So I'm just kind of being with that, right? I'm not diving into it. I'm just being with it. I've had some offers for people to do very like well established people to do a screening for me. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know. I'm still in the process of coming off of it, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm not off of it. I mean off of production because the film lives on now. I get to go to film festivals and talk about it and stuff. But I'm working on some other projects too that I don't really, want to disclose
We
yet.
don't have to keep those close to your chest
But
for
I
now.
definitely feel inspired to move forward with whatever I'm working on. Just the thing is like to keep creating. It doesn't,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't come off as this well, like if not this well executed. It's just you only learn by doing. I think that that's what I think AFI was good for me in that sense. It's like the program is not academic, it's hands on.
Yes.
So you're making films from the first month that you're there. And that process is very important because you can kind of talk about problems that will come up, but you really don't know until you start working on it. So for
Hmm.
me, it's just to keep working, even if I do which I'm planning to do a little thing on my iPhone,
Nice.
just to keep working,
Yeah.
until I'm hired or until I create the next bigger piece. I feel like that's important.
I did
Yeah.
want to ask you because you just touched a little bit on AFI, but how has your filmmaking style changed, since from your first film to with Salt? Have there been any major things that you've incorporated or learned or changed, or just your approach?
Mm, well, when I went to AFI, I went for producing.
Okay.
And the reason why I went for producing was because I directed so much theater that I didn't feel like I necessarily needed to study directing, right? Which I don't know if that was the correct move. But it worked for me in the sense that I did produce this movie as well as direct it and
Yes.
write it. So I think the challenge that I had with this movie, because even though I have my MFA from AFI, how I was really challenged was I was applying to the AFI DWW program, which is the Director's Workshop for Women. And I had the previous year, I was a finalist.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, well, as a finalist, you get to have a conversation with us about why we didn't choose you. And so I said, okay. And I was like, my voice was cracking. I was very sad. Like, what? They didn't choose me. And I remember going, calling them up for my feedback. And they were like, well, it really came down to the story that you submitted. So we really want you to dive into something that's more personal, right? And so it was that challenge that actually, that's how it's changed because the other stories, I just kind of made them up or, we thought they would be good stories,
Mm.
but I put myself in this. Like I really dug deep, and I think that that's the difference in my filmmaking, is really allowing myself to be vulnerable
Mm.
and to one share a personal story, but really go in hard, commit to it, because it's also like telling a story about something that's so controversial, rape,
Yeah.
like, and women are blamed, and how it's laid out, it's like, well, whose fault is it? Is it a woman, is it the man? And this one interview that I did, the guy, somebody called in and was like, "Well, didn't you have a father who could give you mace
Oh my
and a
gosh.
gun and And I was like, "Why should he have to do that? Like, why can't we train men to not, rape women? What about that?
Yeah.
That's an option." But I think really how it's changed is really that challenge of writing something more personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. That was it for me.
Wow.
Because I think if you can write something that you can relate to, that is very personal, then it allows you a skill to be able to recognize that, put yourself in any script you read, to put yourself and be able to bring that to life because you've done that work on yourself, kind of.
Yeah.
Does
No,
that
it,
make
it
sense?
definitely no, it definitely makes sense. I mean, when you bring yourself to the work, I don't know, there's just a synergy that happens, and it just you
Yeah.
can feel it when you're watching it, and others feel it. I mean, it's just that's
Yeah.
where people relate to it. That's where people learn from it, and that's where some healing takes place. So,
Yeah, that, and also I think one of the things that was stressed at AFI was just the process of collaborating. And really, for this project, I really had to lean in on my DP, and I brought in a screenwriter. Like and my actors, I really had to surrender and let them do their work, right? As part of the collaborative experience, to not, yeah, it's an important story for me to tell, but just trust that I had hired the right people and I had given them the right direction so that we could create this. And honestly, the team, it was great. Like, it was a great collaboration. Like, I'm actually nervous about my next film that I don't even know what it is yet, because I'm like, I want this team,
mm-hmm.
because you create a language with the team and a trust. And it was amazing. It was really the best team that I've ever had on a film, you know?
Nice. Oh, I love when you get to work like that with great people.
Oh my
Just
gosh, it
where
was
it's
just
like a
great.
family. So yeah.
Yeah, it was
Well,
really like a family, and we're all different. Like, we don't look alike. It's different cultures, different
mhm.
genders, mostly women actually, and mostly women of color who rocked it,
Yeah.
just really rocked it. That was beautiful. That was really beautiful.
I love that. Well,
Yeah.
we just have a few more minutes left, and so I wanted to just transition a little bit and ask you a few little rapid fire questions, and
Oh,
basically, answer these. If you need like a sentence or two, that would be great with your answers.
okay.
But if not, the best word or whatever word association that you can think of with these questions. So, the first one would be, what other kinds of stories do you want to tell?
Definitely more. I still want to keep diving into my personal vault of stories. And I'm interested in kind of moving into the horror genre.
Ooh.
Yes, I
Okay.
do want to do a horror. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a drama person. Everything I've done is drama. But there's so much drama in horror movies. I love
Yeah.
horror movies. So I
That
want
would be
to,
fun. I love that.
yeah.
All right. Next one is, how do you get into your creative flow?
I try not to leave it. I
Yeah.
try to be in it as I'm walking through the day. Like I meditate, I journal. Those are really helpful. I listen to books on tape. I watch masterclass. I watch a lot of movies. I'm just always immersing myself in the craft in some way. And sometimes it's by painting or sculpting, which isn't necessarily related to storytelling, but the process of creating is the same. So I just try to, even redecorating my house, it's like staying creative. Like, how can this be better or different? How can this inspire me more?
I love that. And speaking of inspiration, who or what inspires you?
Nature really does inspire me because it is always growing and moving and going through a cycle with no effort. That is, that's big for me, nature. So I have to get out in nature on a regular basis. I think someone like Ava DuVernay really inspires me, you know,
Yes,
because
yes.
it's not just because of her filmmaking, it's just because of the community that she's created, right? And how she uses that platform that she has to develop and support other artists. Like I really believe in that. So
Nice.
that's great. But filmmakers inspire me. It's a miracle that any film gets made. It's a hard job, right? I
Yeah.
just saw the this movie called 13 Lives. It's about the kids that got stuck in a cave during the rainy season.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
directed by Ron Howard, and the scuba divers go on and rescue these kids. And that movie was so inspiring. One, because I was on the edge of my seat, but how they had to shoot that with those scuba divers and all that
Wow.
water, like it's just trying to unravel how that actually went down is so interesting to me. So,
Wow. I gotta check that out. I haven't seen
um,
that.
it's so good. It's harrowing, actually. Yeah,
Mm.
but it ends well, as we know.
Okay, yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right, two more questions. So, what does thriving look like to you, whether it be yourself or someone else? What does it mean to thrive? What does that look like to you?
Well, I can tell you what it feels like. It feels free, right?
Mm.
It feels like you are not resisting anything, right? It feels like no one can take you down. No haters, nobody, because you're just in the flow. It's like creative flow. That's thriving. And sometimes that thriving has a dollar amount attached to it, and that's even thriving on a bigger
Yeah.
level. We're aiming for that. But that's what thriving is for me, and just being joyous. So this director named Mary Lou Belly, she's directed over 200 episodes of television, and I had reached out to her, but I'm going to share this with you. She told me to download this and just look at it every day. It says joy, craft, network, and repeat. And then at the bottom it says protect your joy, hone your craft, expand your network. That's thriving if you can stay in that cycle.
Yeah.
That's thriving.
Yes.
Right? And the joy and craft, all of it, like the joy craft and the networking, like make it joyous.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't necessarily like, I'm very social, but sometimes I'm really not, but people would never know it. Like I'm not in the mood,
No,
right?
I don't think I've ever not seen you be social.
The thing
but
is,
but
sometimes
I understand.
I
I
have
get
to
that.
work a little extra hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am generally very social, right?
Yeah.
But like if someone says, if you call it a networking event, I probably don't want to go.
Yeah.
Now I would go and then I would meet everybody and people would like me and I would like them and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But there's something like inside that is resistant because I feel like a networking event, everyone's like this. I mean, I want
Yeah.
something, and what do you? But it doesn't have network is just creating a connection,
Yeah.
right? So even if you just go to those events and you just create one connection, that's networking. You don't know years down. Honestly, the people in my community, some of them I've known for years. Some of them since 5 years old. Some of them since 19 years old. You know, but I've been creating community for a long time. It's just like staying in touch with people, really,
Yeah. And
and meeting new
how
people.
I wanted to ask, because this is the last question and you're touching on it is, how can people find you? Where can they get in touch with you? How can
Ah,
they commune with you?
Oh yes. Well, on Instagram. I'm Hollywood Flow on the go.
Nice.
Hollywood. I used to have a cable access show where I interviewed people called Hollywood Flow on the Go. So I said
Yeah.
that's perfect for my Instagram page.
Nice.
And then I have a website called phyllisbancroft.com.
Mm,
But I would want people to go to that website, but also to go to the With Salt
I
website
was gonna
for
say, yeah.
updates.
Yeah.
And that is withsaltthemovie.com.
And there's social media handles for with salt.
Yes, and
Okay.
yes, we have a Facebook page with Salt. We have an Instagram page with Salt.
All right.
Yes.
Awesome. Well,
So,
we'll share all that
um,
information so people can
yeah,
check you out.
yeah, definitely check it out. There's some great if you go to the website, withsaltthemovie.com, then you can see a trailer of the movie.
Nice. All
And
right.
then you can find out when the next filming is in your area. I
All right.
mean, showing of it is. So,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm sharing all of that information down at the bottom for you. And
Okay, great.
everybody, you have to go to the website, check it out, check out the trailer, and be sure to follow Phyllis and With Salt the Movie on social media. So,
Thank
yeah.
you, people. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Sierra.
Phyllis, thank
Oh
you.
my
Thank you
God.
so much. I
Thank
wanted people to
you.
hear this and for those of you who are still sticking around, like thank you because
Yes.
what people need to hear and see, not only just a representative of the dream being manifest, they have to just know that you have to go all against the odds and just do it. And
Yeah.
Phyllis, you're just you're an image of that. You are a really bright example of that. And so thank you so much for taking the time out to come and visit the
Anything
In
for
Tribe.
you. Anything for you, Sierra. Thank you so
Same
much
here.
for having me. I enjoyed it. It's beautiful to see you doing your thing, thriving.
Ah, thank you.
Lovely.
Thank
Yes.
you. So again, Phyllis, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for tuning in to the In Tribe, and we will see you at the next video. Oh, and please be sure to like and subscribe this video if you took anything from it, and leave a comment below if you learned something, or if you want to share anything below. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you at the next video, or I will see you there. All right, bye.